Hi guys, thank you for tuning into my Senior Honors Academy project presentation. My project is called Proactive Drug Education Plans. It's a little weird to be doing this on video instead of in person, but I'm going to try my best, so just please bear with me. And then also for my lessons, each lesson I reward the students for listening with like games and candy and prizes. And then if it was in person, I would do that for my presentation as well as an incentive to listen. But however, because it is just on video, I will not do that today. Before I really get into my presentation, I'm going to talk about myself for a little bit, even though everyone that's probably watching this already knows about me. But in case you don't, next year I am going to IU, hopefully in the fall. And my intended major is biochemistry with a minor in Spanish. And my future career goal is to be a doctor. However, I'm not quite sure of the type. And then also things that I've been involved with at Concordia over the years include being a gymnast and a cheerleader. And then clubs include HOSA, NHS, Student Council, the Spanish Exchange, and obviously Honors Academy since I'm doing this right now. And also I was a Koinonia leader. However, that's enough about me, so now I'm going to jump right into my project. Instead of immediately telling you about my project, I am going to talk about how I came up with the idea for my project and the steps I took to start it. So I knew I wanted to do something science related, even though that seemed kind of hard. And I didn't know what. I really had no idea because there were so many options I could have chose from, obviously, because science is so broad. But my grandma helps at the Fort Wayne Recovery, and so she thought I should do something with drug addiction and just something helping with that because it's a huge issue. And so I was like, oh, that's a great idea, I'll do that. And then I didn't know where I wanted to go with that or what I wanted to do. And so then I decided that I wanted to educate people, and I didn't really want to do something at Concordia because I feel like there's already steps in place and there's already things that we are doing. So I didn't think that would be that helpful. But growing up, I went to a Lutheran school, which means I was sheltered like most people that go to Concordia, and we never learned anything about drugs in middle school. So I was like, oh, perfect. I'll educate that because there's a need there and people haven't really done that yet. But I ended up not doing middle school, but 5th grade. So a little bit before what I initially thought, but nonetheless, that is how I came to the idea for my project. So now that I've talked about how I came up with the idea for my project, I'm going to talk about what my project actually is for a little bit. And I made 4 40-minute lesson plans catered towards 5th graders, as I have already said, and they are like junior achievement. Like I looked up junior achievement lesson plans to get like ideas and a basis for what I wanted them to be structured like and look like. And like teachers can teach these, or they can have people come in like volunteers, parents, students, whoever, just come in to give the lessons to the kids. And each lesson has specific goals and also reviews the topics from the previous lessons to help drive in those parts. And then some lessons that my lessons include, like the topics, basic information about drugs, drug addiction, like what it is, how it happens, and the idea of tolerance, and then why people use, and then also life skills training, such as like how to say no to both drugs and peer pressure, and then also the types of people that are more at risk for addiction. And I tried to get my lessons actually taught so that I could talk about that, but however, due to this whole corona thing, I wasn't able to have that happen in time to present my project. Right when I was beginning my project, there was like 4 main steps that really got me to start my project. And the first thing I did was research. And I read a lot of academic articles about drugs, their effect on your brain, how they work, what they do, drug addiction, and then also the effect in teenagers and how you can help with that. And I took tons of notes on those. And then I talked to 2 people with different knowledge bases, and one of them was drugs and drug addiction, and another one of them was kids, which obviously is perfect for my project because those are the 2 main things I need to talk about. And then lastly, as I already discussed briefly, was I used junior achievement and their lesson plans as a basis for my own. and how they structured them and what they did for to form a basis for my own. And actually, it was when I was talking with Tyson Flora that I decided that, well, she thought it'd be better if I targeted my lesson plans towards fifth graders as opposed to middle schoolers, because she said that they would be more receptive to the material and they hadn't been as exposed to it. And also they were more rule followers than maybe the middle schoolers because they weren't as worried about being cool. And I help teach Sunday school to fifth graders, and they're not the best. They are not the best listeners, and they are kind of crazy. So maybe the rule followers thing, but it's better than middle schoolers. And I do think that, we did decide that they'd probably be more receptive to it and think more genuinely than like trying to be cool with the whole situation, which we thought was better. And then also another important thing that we talked about was the importance of talking about juuling and stuff, because she sees a huge prevalence of that within their middle school. Just like I said, I started with research. I'm going to start by presenting some of the statistics and stuff I found from that research, and why my fifth graders might be a little bit younger to receive this information. I'm hoping you guys aren't, so I'm going to go ahead and share that with. The first number I have is 67,367, and that is the number of drug overdose deaths in 2018. And if you look to the chart to the right of that, it has those death rates for the total male and female from 1999 to 2018. And as you can see, they have been a significant increase. Like, it's crazy how much higher they are than they used to be. And then the next number is 14%, and that is the number of high school students reported having using illicit or injection drugs. And then the last number is 19.7 million, and that is the number of Americans who have struggled with substance use disorder in 2017, which is an insane amount considering we have like 350 million people in the whole US. Also, a statistic that isn't included in my slide, but I thought was really important to share, is the fact that according to a cross-sectional survey that had a nationally representative sample of over 10,000 adolescents aged 13 to 18 years, 78% of teenagers reported having consumed alcohol, which is, I would figure, but 15% of those having met the criteria for lifetime abuse according to the guidelines of the survey. And then also they concluded that the median age of onset for drug abuse with dependence or without dependence was between the ages of 14 and 15, which is honestly really young, and that's right when kids enter high school. So obviously something needs to be done before they enter high school to prevent that and to try to get less kids to fall into that trap. Another piece of really good information I found was the Iceland Model. 20 years ago, Iceland actually suffered the highest abuse rates among teens, like worldwide, but due to things that they implemented within their nation, they have drastically changed that in 20 years, and they now have one of the lowest abuse rates among teens nationwide, which I think is insane that they did that quick. And one of the articles I read discussed how they did that, and they did that by primarily focusing on 3 different aspects of what they could do to improve their nation and to improve the average life of a teenager, so they weren't dealing with all this drug abuse around them to help their nation's issue. And the first thing that they focused on was healthy activities. And what they did is they provided things for activities for teens to do so that they weren't bored, because a lot of teens would experiment drugs out of boredom. So they provided these activities for the teens to do so that they weren't bored and they kept them busy. And then also they did other activities so that they had ways to outlet their stress and anxiety in healthy ways that actually decrease their anxiety rather than turning to drugs to try to hide from their problems, which also includes life skills training as to like how to actually cope with their problems rather than hide from them through alcohol or drugs or other poor means. Now, the second thing that Iceland did was encourage quality time between kids and parents, which is a hard thing to do, and it takes a community, and also not everyone can do that. But they found that by encouraging family dinners and encouraging families to spend more time with their kids, that it really did help with the issue. And however, I can't do that with my project. I try to incorporate that by educating children along with their parents and having the kids take home summaries of their lesson plans and other things, other information for the parents to look at as to how they can become more involved and how they can take steps themselves to help try to prevent their kids from falling into the trap of drug abuse. Now, the last thing that Iceland implemented was community commitment, which is another hard thing to do in my lessons. But what they did is they tried to get parents to be a little bit more strict with their kids about when they let them drink at home and with curfews and stuff. And then they also tried to make it easier for kids to have access to extracurricular activities so that, again, like the first one, they had more things to do. And while, again, that's hard to do with just my lesson plans, I work on educating children and their parents in many different preventative activities and actions to try to teach them about other things to do and other ways that they can spend their time. While the Iceland model is very extensive, clearly it works by the results they've seen, and also it's going to take a lot of extensive work to really reverse the drug epidemic that's going on in our country, but I tried to condense it into these lessons. So now that I've talked about all this pre-stuff to get you guys ready to hear about my actual lessons, I'm just going to jump right into it. And as you can see here, this is what they look like. And now I'm going to actually go through my lessons and describe each one and what my focus was and what I worked on. So to begin with, as you can see highlighted, one of my goals in every lesson is to normalize the kids' curiosity about drugs and to also teach them that drugs are not evil in themselves, and just teach them what they are and what they do, and not to scare them, because a lot of the articles I read said do not use scare tactics when trying to prevent your kids or your teens from using drugs because they're not going to work. And so instead of scaring them about it, my lessons really try to be straight up about what they are and just give it to it in a straightforward way of what they are and what they do. In my lessons, I also tried to make it seem less academic and more laid back so that it would be more personable. And one of the ways I did that was by having them sit in a circle inside of their desks and by reminding them to pay attention during class, because at the end there would be a Kahoot or a game so that they could win prizes at the end, which was an incentive to win, but also gave it a more fun feel so it didn't feel like normal school. I try to make these lessons not feel like a health class. However, the first one is a little bit, because it starts off with listing drugs and certain types of drugs, what they do, and examples that I hope, and like they're in 5th grade, so they might know some of them, they might not, but just to give them something, like a little exposure to them. And then also questions are encouraged so that if kids do have any questions about them or things that they've heard of, they'll talk about that more. And like I said before, at the end of each lesson, they'll have things to take home, and they might have homework, and in lesson 1 they did. And also it ends with questions and answers with rewards as like the previous incentive to get them to listen, but also to try to help them retain that information that they learned. And while I didn't talk about this to 5th graders because they're not going to understand it, but since the first lesson is about basic drugs and withdrawal, different drugs cause different amounts of dopamine to be released in the brain, which, depending on that amount, makes them more addictive. And so the students are taught that certain drugs are more addictive, but they're not taught about why. But also, individuals whose brains are still developing, such as the young, means that these different these unnatural amounts of dopamine cause more issues with their brains and more disruptions and causes more issues overall. For the second lesson plan, the main topic was the idea of tolerance and why people use. And also reviewing topics from lesson 1, it discusses the motivation behind using drugs, because drugs are not evil or bad in themselves, and it's a behavior, not the person, that you have to focus on, and then when someone's using drugs. And it's also like the motivation behind using drugs, and that can make them bad and lead to bad consequences. And one of the examples we gave was ibuprofen, because you're using that to feel better, and so it's not bad. Like they talked about in lesson 1, it's really important that they know that drugs are not evil or bad in themselves, and that it's the thing behind the drug that's using the drug in a specific purpose that's bad. It's like a gun, because the gun doesn't do anything, but if a person chooses to use it poorly, then the gun isn't evil, but the person might be for the choices that it made. And then also, the kids are shown like different types of drugs that are helpful, because a drug is just something that alters your body chemistry, like ibuprofen, and you would only take that if you had a headache, but it's not evil, it's just you're taking it to help your headache. But drugs can be used in poor ways that makes them bad because people are using it wrongly. And then an example that we give to students is that if someone throws the ball at you, even though the ball is what hit and hurt you, the ball isn't evil. It was the person that was using the ball in the wrong way. And so that is how we explain motivation behind using drugs, and why abuse of drugs is what leads to issues, but the drug itself is not evil. So in the second lesson, after reviewing topics from the first lesson and explaining the idea of tolerance, students are asked if they think drugs are and can be dangerous, and if so, in what way. And so the teacher's goal is to use this conversation to draw attention to the fact that drugs can be dangerous because they are addictive. And then also use this conversation to steer kids towards the topic of why people use drugs, because that's the basis of lesson 2. And things that you can talk about that the teachers would talk about is that it's fun, it helps them relax, it's like a reward, and it helps them not think about their problems. And the example that we gave was like watching a movie, but with a lot more consequences. And then also they're encouraged to share ways of how they cope with stressful things. And like for me, if I was sharing it, I'd be like, oh, working out, going outside, hanging out with friends, taking a nap, doing a face mask. And then you can ask them things that they do that are fun to try to steer that towards them and help them apply it to themselves more. Then after sharing healthy ways of coping, the teacher can go to talk about drugs and how consuming them can be a slippery slope, and it's easy to get caught into problems when using that to deal with your problems, and instead of helping them, you actually create more. And then for this lesson, they're asked to ask the kids, despite all the issues overusing drugs causes, why do people continue to use them despite the obvious negative consequences in their real life from doing so? And to answer, hopefully they're going to try to steer them towards bringing back the topics of addiction and withdrawal, and that it's hard for the people not to use, and so to bring back those concepts to further reinforce them. And then again, this lesson, too, like the first one, ends with a game and introducing the next topic. Then the main topics of lesson 3 are how to say no and what kinds of people are more at risk for drugs. And then also, like every other lesson, starts by reviewing the lesson before. So obviously it starts by reviewing lessons 1 and 2. So it begins with what kinds of people have more addictive personalities and are therefore more likely to become addicted. And examples are given for each one of these, but a brief thing is people that have other mental health issues, smarter people, more intelligent, risk takers, people with little self-control, emotional people, and sometimes cautious people who can't connect easily to others, and also people that might not feel as bad when they actually take the drugs, so the negatives don't feel as bad as they actually are. And then the next topic is one of my favorites of the whole thing, and it's an exercise of how to say no to peer pressure or uncomfortable situations. And first, preferably, they want a high school. I want a high school student to come in and just share a story about them saying no to peer pressure. And it doesn't have to be drugs, just anything that they didn't want to do and how they said no, so that students like look up to someone that's older than them and think it's cool, like cooler coming from an adult, and they're more likely to pay attention. So after hearing this story, the kids are going to play a game where they have to pretend to say no to an uncomfortable situation. And the best way to do that is teaching them to be confident and assertive. And then also, all they have to say is no or no thanks. And if the person keeps trying to bother them and asking them to, or trying to get them to do something, they just say, Did you hear what I said? And all they have to do is just stick to saying that thing, and they don't have to try to explain themselves, because that's just letting the other person try to manipulate them into doing it more than they should be letting the other person. Also, what I love is because this is a game, so it's kind of fun for the students to do, and then you can like break them up into. I want them to like break up into groups and just practice. So I think that's a valuable life skill that can help them in like lots of other ways of their life. Okay, so for the last lesson, it's mostly just a review of all the lessons previously, and then at the end, it tells students that while they have been light, it tries to steer kids towards trying to use drugs in the right way if they use them, and that lots of bad things can happen when drugs are misused, and it just try to prevent them from doing that. And then also, there's another fun game in this lesson which I really like, and actually my mentor uses it for people in the drug at Fort Wayne Recovery who are recovering from drug addiction. And for the game, you give each student a piece of paper and have them rip it in half. Then you have the students tear one of the halves in half. Now they should have 3 pieces of paper, 1 big and 2 small ones. And then you have the students write something important on their life on the 3 sheets, putting the most important thing of the 3 on the biggest sheet. And then the instructor gets to play God, and they get to go around and take some of the sheets from the students, taking them away. And if they argue, you just say, well, I'm God, so I'm taking whatever I want. Now, if the student's big sheet contains something involving taking care of themselves, then they get to keep the other 2 sheets. And the goal of this is just to show the importance of actually taking care of yourself. And if you're trying to solve your issues by doing something that's like self-destructive, you're not solving your issues, and you can't even take care of the things that are important to you. And so that's the bigger picture of that game, but making it in a more simplified way that's more fun for the students. So I think that game is really good and fun and beneficial. And that's the basis and a brief overview of my project. And obviously there's tons of more things that are incorporated in my project and things I learned along the way, but as a result of time, I didn't have time to share them all. But hopefully that gave you guys enough of an idea of what I did and why and how. So there's my project. And I would just like to thank everyone for watching, and especially the people that helped me create this project, including Mrs. Flora, my grandma, and especially my mentor, Mr. Newson. So thank you for watching. Hope you got an idea of what my project.
Well, hi, Luann and Regan. This is Chris Knudsen from Fort Wayne Recovery. Just sending you a quick video to say how much I enjoyed working with you, Regan, and that I really appreciated your open-mindedness and your willingness and all of the hard work and effort that you put into putting together a great program for the kids. I think that the earlier you can learn about self-care, about anything that you do that promote you to be your best is awesome. So, all of the dedication and commitment that you have moving forward, whatever vocation you choose when you move on to college, is going to serve you well in life. So, good luck to you, and I look forward to hearing from you and seeing how you're doing in the future. Take care of yourself, and we'll talk soon. Thanks. Bye.